Dr. Shalini, a qualified obstetrics and gynecology specialist who graduated in 2006 from the University of Calcutta, India, registered with the GMC in 2013. She was employed at East Lancashire NHS Trust during the events in question and presently works there as a locum consultant. The allegations against Dr. Shalini pertain to her application for a certificate of eligibility for specialist registration between May 2021 and February 2022. It is alleged that she dishonestly altered the dates on 2 certificates of attendance for an episiotomy, 3rd and 4th degree tiers hands-on workshops submitted with her application, which were found to be false upon investigation by the GMC. This matter was escalated to GMC Fitness to Practice due to concerns regarding the authenticity of the certificates. During the proceedings, the tribunal considered various forms of evidence related to Dr. Shalini's case. Witnesses who provided statements included the specialist applications manager at the GMC and an administrator for the 3rd and 4th degree perineal tiers and episiotomy course. Dr. Shalini presented her own witness statement and also testified orally. Additionally, Mrs. C., a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at the trust and one of Dr. Shalini's CESR supervisors, provided her testimony. The tribunal reviewed documents such as certificates of attendance for the episiotomy, 3rd and 4th degree tiers hands-on workshop with fabricated dates, November 1, 2015 and February 5, 2022, specialty-specific guidance for CESR applications in obstetrics and gynecology, email correspondences concerning the submitted certificates, Dr. Shalini's curriculum vitae, reflective statements, certificates of attendance for other courses, continuing professional development certificates, emails, and testimonials from colleagues at the trust. These pieces of evidence collectively contributed to the tribunal's assessment of the case. During her oral testimony, Dr. Shalini offered insights into her motivations and reasoning behind her actions. She explained that the pressure of her responsibilities at work, combined with the expectation of completing her CESR, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and other personal pressures, led her to act dishonestly by falsifying certificates for the episiotomy workshops. She recognized that her actions were not justified and expressed her sincere apology for them, acknowledging that her dishonesty was self-serving. Dr. Shalini admitted to not fully understanding the importance of the 5-year rule for CESR evidence at the time of her application. She recounted how she altered the certificate's date from 2014 to 2015, thinking it would be sufficient even though the course was completed beyond the 5-year period. She also confessed to not grasping the potential advancements made in the course content after her initial completion in 2014, a perspective that contributed to her second falsification in February 2022. She expressed deep shame over her dishonest behavior, which weighed on her even before the GMC and her COG got involved. Despite this remorse, she did not take the initiative to address her dishonesty until prompted by external factors. Dr. Shalini revealed that the pressure to complete her CESR application, along with her desire to apply for a substantive consultant post within the trust, influenced her second falsification. Dr. Shalini reflected on the importance of patient trust and her responsibility as a doctor, emphasizing that her past actions now inform her approach to patient interactions. She acknowledged the impact of her behavior on colleagues and the medical profession, expressing regret for not considering the broader implications before her actions. In retrospect, Dr. Shalini identified areas where she could have acted differently, including seeking guidance from colleagues in the GMC when faced with challenges, as well as being more open about her concerns. She highlighted her efforts to improve her approach and decision-making, indicating that she has resubmitted her CESR application, completed necessary courses within the 5-year rule, and become more comfortable with sharing concerns with senior staff to appropriately share responsibilities and alleviate stress. Dr. Shalini admitted to misleadingly including the 2022 date on her CV to align it with her CESR application, even though she had not attended the workshop on that date. She acknowledged her errors and outlined the changes she has made to her approach to prevent such behavior in the future. Mrs. C., a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist at the trust and one of Dr. Shalini's CESR supervisors, spoke highly of Dr. Shalini's professional qualities. Mrs. C. portrayed Dr. Shalini as an excellent clinician and a person of integrity, except for the instance of dishonesty, which she considered an anomaly. She highlighted Dr. Shalini's usual behavior of being open and honest, particularly in situations where things have gone wrong. She acknowledged the pressures faced by the obstetrics and gynecology department at the trust during the COVID-19 pandemic, including staffing challenges due to illness and shielding, which might have made it difficult for Dr. Shalini to attend the workshop in February 2022. She expressed her personal distress and disappointment upon discovering Dr. Shalini's dishonesty. She reflected on her role as Dr. Shalini's CESR supervisor and clarified that she did not have the responsibility of checking every piece of evidence in the application. She emphasized that Dr. Shalini's recent attendance at an episiotomy workshop was of minimal importance, as long as she had attended such a course at some point. Mrs. C explained that for a Certificate of Completion of Training (CCT) application, the requirement was to complete such a course only once. She reaffirmed her confidence in Dr. Shalini's surgical skills, noting that she would trust Dr. Shalini to perform pelvic floor repairs. Overall, Mrs. C depicted Dr. Shalini as a dedicated and competent clinician, and despite the incident of dishonesty, she held a positive view of Dr. Shalini's professional abilities and character. The GMC representative asserted that Dr. Shalini's fitness to practice was currently impaired due to her misconduct, as outlined in the allegations. The counsel emphasized that all aspects of the allegations, which Dr. Shalini admitted, constituted serious misconduct and breached the principles of good medical practice, 2013, particularly referring to specific paragraphs 65, 66, 68, and 71, in GMP. The counsel highlighted that Dr. Shalini's dishonest conduct took place within her clinical practice, involving dishonesty on 2 separate occasions and subsequent dishonesty related to her CV. She emphasized that this behavior persisted over a span of 14 months. The counsel pointed out that while Dr. Shalini's application was not successful, had it been accepted, patients could have been put at risk as she hadn't completed the required course, which was meant to keep clinical knowledge up to date according to the GMC's 5-year rule. The counsel argued that Dr. Shalini's dishonesty undermined public confidence in the profession, the GMC, and trust in doctors as she sought entry onto the specialist register without fulfilling the necessary requirements. She asserted that her misconduct had the potential to tarnish the reputation of the medical profession and affect trust in it. The counsel acknowledged that a finding of misconduct due to dishonesty doesn't necessarily lead to a finding of impairment, but she asserted that in this case, considering Dr. Shalini's seniority and the recurring nature of her dishonesty, current impairment should be assessed. She referred to the Grant test, which includes criteria related to patient safety, bringing the profession into disrepute, breaching fundamental tenets of the profession, and acting dishonestly. The counsel contended that Dr. Shalini's past actions met all 4 criteria of the Grant test and highlighted that dishonesty is challenging to remediate. She suggested that Dr. Shalini's insight into her actions and medical ethics was still developing. While recognizing Dr. Shalini's efforts towards insight and remediation, the counsel argued that these efforts were not yet complete and that a finding of impairment was necessary for the public interest and to maintain confidence in the profession and the GMC's regulatory role. On behalf of Dr. Shalini, the counsel argued that Dr. Shalini has shown a high level of insight and remediation. She highlighted that Dr. Shalini is a conscientious and reflective practitioner dedicated to ongoing learning and improvement, indicating her commitment to her future career. The counsel maintained that while dishonesty is typically challenging to remediate, Dr. Shalini had successfully taken steps to address her behavior in this case. The counsel contended that Dr. Shalini's dishonest actions were not continuous over a period of 14 months, as suggested, but rather involved altering the same certificate in an amateurish manner on 2 separate occasions. She argued that the nature of Dr. Shalini's actions was not sophisticated and was likely to be discovered eventually. She reminded the tribunal of Dr. Shalini's history of exemplary conduct and pointed to the testimony of Mrs. C, who attested to Dr. Shalini's clinical competency. She emphasized that Dr. Shalini had previously completed the required workshop, and she urged the tribunal to consider the circumstances under which the dishonesty occurred. The counsel emphasized the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, which affected support and supervision while Dr. Shalini continued to serve patients and the medical community. She argued that the pressures on Dr. Shalini during this time, including the need to submit her CESR application for a potential substantive consultant post, must be taken into account when assessing her state of mind and decision-making abilities. She asserted that while Dr. Shalini's actions were a significant mistake, she is not generally dishonest. Referring to the positive testimonials provided in support of Dr. Shalini, the counsel asserted that Dr. Shalini's impressive level of insight and extensive remediation efforts make it highly unlikely for her misconduct to recur. She suggested that a comprehensive understanding of the facts and circumstances would lead the public to conclude that a finding of impairment is not necessary. The counsel concluded that the public would find satisfaction in the rigorous fitness to practice process Dr. Shalini underwent, given its public nature. She reminded the tribunal that even if it found no impairment, it could still issue a warning, and she invited the tribunal to determine that Dr. Shalini's fitness to practice is not currently impaired.
The tribunal concluded that Dr. Shalini's conduct amounted to serious misconduct. She had dishonestly submitted false certificates on 2 occasions, first in May 2021 and then in February 2022. While she had altered the date on the first certificate in 2020, it was considered preparatory to her subsequent dishonesty. The tribunal acknowledged that Dr. Shalini genuinely believed she could only submit evidence within 5 years of her application, as this was not communicated due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the tribunal did not accept her claim that she had forgotten about the falsification when she submitted the application in May 2021, viewing this as an opportunity for her to rectify her dishonesty. Additionally, the tribunal noted that the second dishonesty in February 2022 was more serious, as it compounded the initial dishonesty and falsely suggested recent learning. In light of these actions, the tribunal found that Dr. Shalini had breached several aspects of good medical practice, including honesty and integrity, accurate communication, and proper documentation. The tribunal determined that her conduct constituted serious misconduct. The tribunal thoroughly assessed whether Dr. Shalini's fitness to practice was currently impaired as a result of her serious misconduct. It recognized her open and candid acknowledgement of the dishonesty, as well as her genuine remorse and insight into the gravity of her actions. Dr. Shalini's commitment to remediation through CPD and changes in her practice and personal life were considered positively. The tribunal noted that her misconduct, involving submitting falsified certificates for her CESR application, theoretically had the potential to compromise patient safety, although the application was ultimately unsuccessful for various reasons. While finding that there was a very low risk of repetition, the tribunal concluded that a finding of impairment was necessary to emphasize the gravity of the misconduct and maintain public trust in the medical profession standards. Therefore, the tribunal determined that Dr. Shalini's fitness to practice was impaired due to her misconduct.
The tribunal proceeded to consider the appropriate sanction for Dr. Shalini's misconduct. During this stage, both the GMC and Dr. Shalini's representative presented their arguments. On behalf of the GMC, it was argued that suspension would be an appropriate sanction. The GMC emphasized the serious nature of the misconduct and the need to maintain public confidence and professional standards. They acknowledged Dr. Shalini's acceptance of fault, insight, remediation, and low risk of repetition. The GMC indicated that they were not seeking an immediate suspension order, allowing time for certain patients to receive care. On behalf of Dr. Shalini, her representative argued that there were no patient safety or clinical competence issues involved. They reiterated the tribunal's previous findings regarding her insight, remediation, and the exceptional circumstances surrounding the case. It was highlighted that the alterations to certificates were unsophisticated and that Dr. Shalini had undergone positive remediation and maintained her competence. Her representative pointed out that Dr. Shalini had been forthcoming about her dishonesty with colleagues and was currently working at the same trust, which would subject her to additional scrutiny. The representative questioned the necessity of suspension, given the absence of clinical concerns, and suggested that if suspension were deemed appropriate, a short and non-reviewable period would be proportionate considering Dr. Shalini's level of insight and remediation efforts. They also proposed that conditions, including a workplace mentor and regular reporting to the GMC, could be considered. The tribunal considered various factors, including the seriousness of the misconduct, the overarching objective of protecting the public, and the principles of proportionality. The tribunal reviewed both mitigating and aggravating factors related to the case. Mitigating factors included Dr. Shalini's overall honesty and good character, her competency as a doctor with no clinical concerns, positive regard from consultant colleagues, absence of repetition or prior misconduct, acknowledgement of fault, engagement with the GMC, rapid recognition of the need to remediate, attendance at relevant courses, admissions of dishonesty, expression of genuine remorse, and the presence of a support network. Aggravating factors included dishonesty toward the regulatory body, dishonesty occurring on multiple occasions, alteration of certificates indicating attendance at a course not attended, alteration of dates on her CV, failure to rectify the issue when notified by the GMC, and not seeking support from her workplace during the time of perceived pressures. Regarding no action, the tribunal found that the misconduct was serious and not fundamentally incompatible with continued registration and not meeting the threshold for exceptional circumstances. Regarding conditions, the tribunal considered the complexity of formulating appropriate and measurable conditions for dishonesty-related misconduct and concluded that conditions would not sufficiently address the seriousness of the misconduct. The tribunal then assessed whether a suspension was an appropriate sanction. It noted that suspension has a deterrent and punitive effect, sends a signal about unacceptable behavior, and protects the public and the reputation of the profession. The tribunal found that Dr. Shalini's misconduct warranted suspension, given the serious nature of the dishonesty and its potential impact on public confidence. Considering the mitigating and aggravating factors, the tribunal determined that a 3-month suspension would adequately address the misconduct's seriousness, maintain public confidence, and allow Dr. Shalini to return to her medical practice afterward. A longer suspension was deemed disproportionate and punitive. The tribunal considered a review hearing or an immediate order to be unnecessary.